Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 72 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is pomegranate molasses caramelized shrimp with saffron risotto cake. You have seen pomegranates in the holiday markets, but have you ever tried to cook with them? Pomegranate molasses has a sweet and bitter taste that caramelizes well with shrimp. Pomegranate seeds make a great garnish, and the seeds pop in your mouth. Combine the burgundy and orange color of the molasses and shrimp with the yellow of the risotto cake, and you have a very attractive plate. Because most shrimp have been frozen, cooking must be brief to avoid making them become rubbery. Here you will practice sautéing shrimp and making risotto as you did in the Master Risotto recipe. You will also learn to refresh saffron, which draws out its subtle flavor and color. The challenges of this dish are to make the risotto al dente, not to overcook the shrimp, and to plate and serve everything hot. Techniques today are chopping, refreshing and cooking shrimp, sautéing, refreshing saffron, sweating, seasoning, deglazing and reducing, making risotto al dente, adjusting seasoning and keeping warm, plating, using a ring mold, and garnishing. So let's start cooking. All right, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 72. We're going to need to have 8 jumbo shrimp. Now these are U8 to 12. That means there's 8 to 12 per pound. And I think this is a good size. And they should have the tail on, and peel them and devein them. Keep the peels to make shrimp stock later on. We'll also need to have about 1½ cups of rice to make risotto. Now I'm using arborio rice. You could also use carnaroli. Some people think the carnaroli is better and creamier. It's a matter of personal opinion, I think. Now I said about 1½ cups. It's not as crucial to have a certain amount of rice when you are making risotto. If you're making regular rice, the proportion of the rice to the water is important. But with risotto, it isn't, because you're just going to be adding a liquid until it's absorbed and until the rice is done. So about 1½ cups is enough to do the 4 servings that we're going to be doing in this lesson. You may have a little bit left over. You also need to have about 5 cups of shrimp stock. Remember, we make our own stock in this course. You can go to my website, www.chefsapprentice.com, for the stock chart. It gives you the ingredients for any kind of stock. I also have 2 bonus lessons. One on making dashi, which is a Japanese fish stock, and one on making duck stock. You can modify the duck stock to make shrimp simply by using shrimp shells instead of using duck bones. We'll also need to have some saffron threads. Now saffron, a little bit goes a long way. The package that came in this container is 1/2 gram. We're going to use about 1/2 of that, so about 1/4 gram, which is roughly about 1/8 of a teaspoon, and it's little threads. I mean, they're so small I can't even really pick them up to show you, but about 1/8 of a teaspoon of saffron threads. We need to have some olive oil, and about 2 large shallots that have been finely chopped, about 8 large garlic cloves that have been finely chopped, about 1/2 cup of white wine, but we're just going to eyeball that when we get to it. We need to have about 3 tablespoons of pomegranate molasses, but we're also just going to eyeball that when we get to it. And this is not that easy to find in grocery stores, but I got it. Where else? On Amazon. We'll also need to have some pomegranate seeds. And if it's winter, you can just buy pomegranates and then take the seeds out of the pomegranates. They come out very easily. But in the spring and summertime, I find them in the grocery stores. I got this package here at Whole Foods yesterday. You also need to have some chives, and chives, you know, they're about 6 or 7 inches long, and you want to have 4 of these because you're serving 4 people, and you don't want to have them cut. You want to have 4 whole uncut chives. And then we'll need to have kosher salt and peppermill for black, freshly ground black pepper. And that's all the ingredients we'll need. We'll break, come back, and I'll show you the equipment for lesson 72. One thing I forgot to mention is that you should warm the stock. I just took this out of the freezer. I'm going to thaw it. I'm going to bring it up to warm. We'll need it to be warm when we start to make the risotto, just as we did in the Risotto Master Recipe. Okay, let's break and do the equipment. All right, for lesson 72, we're going to need a cutting board and a chef's knife. We're going to need a colander to refresh the shrimp. We're going to do this over the sink. So I have a colander that fits over the sink, but you can just use one that goes down into the sink. That would be fine. You need to have a bowl or a sizzle plate to hold your shrimp. I have them on a sizzle plate. You'll need to have a saucepan and wooden spoon to make the risotto. You need to have a saucepan to hold the warm stock that you're going to be using to make the risotto. You need to have a bowl and a metal spoon to toss the shrimp. Now, why a metal spoon? Because the pomegranate molasses is very sticky, and if you use either your hands or a wooden spoon, a lot of it's going to stick to your hands with a wooden spoon. I think you have better luck tossing with a metal spoon. We also need to have a saute pan to cook the shrimp, and then a sizzle plate or bowl to receive the shrimp after they've been cooked. Then we'll need to have some ring molds. These are 2.5-inch ring molds. We've used these in a prior lesson. We're going to be using these to plate up the risotto at the end. And we'll need to have a metal spoon to do the plating. All right, that is, and of course we'll need to have plates. Haven't picked those yet. So that's all of the equipment. We'll break, come back, and start cooking. One thing I forgot to mention is the number of ring molds. I'm going to use 4 ring molds because I'm making 4 plates. If you only have 1 ring mold, you can do with that. I think it's easier if you have the same number of ring molds that you're making plates. Okay, that's it. We'll come back and start cooking. All right, the first thing on our prep list is to refresh the shrimp. Now, what does that mean? That means that we're going to pour some kosher salt over the shrimp. Actually, what you might think is a huge amount of salt, okay? And we're going to rub it into the shrimp. And then we're going to rinse it off. And what that does is it kind of firms up the shrimp a little bit. It also kind of gives it back that taste of the sea. And you're going to rinse it off, so it's not going to be overly salty like you would think it would be with this much salt. Okay, so now we're going to do is just rinse all that off. Okay, next thing you want to do is blot them dry, and then just keep them on a sizzle plate until we are ready to cook them. Now, the next thing on our prep list is to add the saffron to the stock. Now, the stock, remember, we already have that warm. And what we're going to do is crush up the saffron threads with our fingers, and then, so we have kind of a powder actually. And then we're just going to add them to this stock. There we go. I want to stir them in. And then we're just going to keep this stock warm until we start making the risotto. All right, now we're going to sweat the shallots in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and we're going to do this in the pan in which we are going to make the risotto. Stir that up a bit. Make sure they're coated. Let them sweat, as we always do. Okay, we're going to add about half the garlic and stir that up for about 30 seconds. Okay, now let's add the rice. Let's add some salt, lightly, and some pepper, again lightly, and stir it up so that all of those rice kernels get coated with the oil. This is the same as the Master Risotto recipe. Now we're going to deglaze with some white wine. I think the description says about a half a cup. And let that reduce till just wet. Okay, now we're going to start adding the stock. Start with about 1 ladle's worth. Well, maybe a little more. Let's get the rice covered. Now remember, you need to keep an eye on the rice. You need to be stirring it regularly. You need to be stirring in the corners. As that liquid gets absorbed, you're going to be adding more liquid to it. And you can probably see, I hope you can see the nice yellow color that we're getting here from the saffron. Now, the next step is after the rice is about half cooked. Now, what does that mean? Well, what we're going for is al dente. And al dente means that it just has a slight bit of chewiness to it. It's not mushy, it's not soft, okay? Now, right now, the rice kernels, they're gonna be hard, like they're uncooked rice kernels. So we want something that's somewhere in the middle. Now, as you do risotto long enough, you'll start to see how long it takes for it to get to the al dente stage. It's going to depend upon your saucepan, how much liquid you're putting in, the heat on your stove. So there's no time that I can give you on how long it's going to take. So when the rice is about halfway cooked, that's when we're going to do the next step. Okay, so our shrimp is about half cooked. Now, you might say, well, how can I do this next step if I'm supposed to be watching that risotto and stirring it? Well, the answer is, if you keep the heat relatively low and you do this next step right after you've added stock, you're pretty safe. But you still have to do both. You have to keep an eye on both and make sure that your rice gets stirred and that it doesn't start to burn off all of the liquid and burn. Okay, so what we're going to do is now we're going to walk over to the stove and stir the rice. Okay, now we are going to add I added the other half of the garlic to the shrimp. I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of pomegranate molasses, and I'm just going to eyeball that. You want to get a nice coverage on the shrimp, okay? And then we want to add some salt and pepper, lightly. Now before we stir it up, we're going to go stir the rice again. Okay, now we want to toss these shrimp, and remember I said the pomegranate molasses is kind of sticky, so I'm using a metal spoon instead of a wooden spoon or my hands to do this. I want to keep the pomegranate molasses in the bowl with the shrimp. I don't want it to be ending up mostly on the spoon or on my hands. Okay, now we have it mixed. Now the next step is that when the shrimp gets close, okay, so you're going to have to be, I'm sorry, when the rice gets close, you're going to have to be checking the rice, and when you think it's getting to be close to al dente, that's when we're going to do the next step, which is to saute the shrimp. Okay, so let's check our rice. It's getting there. It's getting close. Okay, so now we're going to do the shrimp. So we want medium heat, maybe medium to high heat, because we're sautéing. We're going to put in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Let that get hot till it's almost, till we're getting just starting to get whiffs of smoke. All right, so we're just starting to get some whiffs of smoke. We're going to add some stock to our risotto, and then we're going to add our 4 shrimp at a time to the pan. We're going to cook them about 1 to 2 minutes per side. Meanwhile, we're keeping an eye on the risotto, and in the Risotto Master Recipe, the goal was at the end to have a risotto that was kind of soupy. You know, we didn't want it to be dry. However, we don't want it to be soupy today because we need to mold it, okay? So we got to keep a close eye toward the end. As we're adding stock, we want to add stock as it's needed, but we don't want it to get too soupy. Right now, it's fine. More of that stock is going to get absorbed before it's cooked. But I'm not going to add any more right now for that reason. Okay, now because of the size of these shrimp, and because I see some nice orange forming down around the tails, I'm going to turn them now. It's been 1.5 minutes. We're going to do another 1.5 minutes on this side as well. Check our risotto. It's not done yet. Okay, these look beautiful. We're going to take these off, keep them warm, do the next 4 the same way. All right, let's check our risotto. Still not quite al dente. I'm going to add a little bit more stock. We're going to take these off the heat, keep them warm till we're ready to plate. Okay, our risotto is done, and as you can see, it's not soupy, right? It's got a little bit of a body to it, so we'll be able to plate it in the ring molds. Now let's taste it. I think it needs a little bit of salt. And we're going to give it a little bit more pepper. Stir that up. I'm on very low heat right now. Very low heat. As low as it'll go. All right, let's taste it again. Perfect. Okay. Time to plate up. Okay, so we have our plate, we have our ring mold. Place our ring mold in the center of the plate and then spoon some of the risotto into the ring mold. And these are pretty tall ring molds, so if you go too tall, there's more of a chance that the whole thing's going to fall over after you finish putting the risotto into the ring mold. So I'm coming about 3/4 of the way up and using my spoon to press it down into the mold so it makes kind of like a cake, right? Then we're going to push down on the risotto and carefully lift off the ring mold. Beautiful. Now we want to place 2 shrimp around the risotto cake. Then we want to garnish with a few pomegranate seeds. Then you want to take one of your chives, fold it in half so it's a V shape, make a little incision in the top of your risotto cake and place that chive in the top there. And there you have it. That's lesson 72, pomegranate molasses caramelized shrimp with a saffron risotto cake garnished with pomegranate seeds. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is @ChefsApprentice Cook Like a Pro. Next up is a mushroom ragu with truffle butter and a shired quail egg. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.